One point I'd like to add on that, and there's, I'm sure on their QWERTY keyboards, there's a big red button. This is the default button. And when they get to the end of their article, they go like that, sorry, sound man. They hit this button and it prints Nazi, British, racist, fascist, you know, and it prints it, so they don't have to do it every time. Right, now we go on to the next question. This is very, very relevant and a serious question. And I'm going to go to the chairman to start this, so I think he should say it. And the question comes from Gareth, and he says, may I please ask what the British National Party's position is on the current Gurkha row? There's a nettle we must grasp.
There's a nettle must be grasped, because our policy position is the country's full, no more immigrants.
Right.
And of course, then the public is thinking, well, the Gurkhas are very good chaps, which they are. Tremendous addition to the British military over many years, to whom we owe a great debt. But there is a degree of populist hysteria in what the press have been doing in recent weeks. And the problem here is that they're saying, yes, we owe these Gurkhas all this, we must let them come to this country. Now, for things like proper medical care, for the old chaps and war heroes, real war heroes and so on, for anyone, as this government has done, to quibble about that and try and dodge it is a disgrace. But to allow 100,000, including with their families, to come and settle in the most overcrowded country in Europe, that's going a bit far. And I think what the public are thinking, they are thinking, the problem here is this government is letting all these thoroughly unworthy, destructive sorts of immigration and thoroughly unpleasant sorts of immigrants in some cases into our country. The one bunch who, if anyone deserves to come here, actually deserve to come here, they keep them out, and that's grotesquely unfair. This government's hideously hypocritical, and they should, on their policy, most definitely let them in, because they do deserve to be here. But what the media are overlooking, and all the politicians have jumped on this bandwagon, is that every single Gurkha who served in the British Army, including the Second World War, Korea and so on, they were all volunteers who were paid to do it, and people are somehow saying in effect that they should be raised up above the chaps now in their 70s and 80s who were ordinary squaddies at that time, and they fought in the Second World War and the Korean War as conscripts. They didn't have a choice. And there's a hideous hypocrisy of people who say, we've got to look after the Gurkhas, where there are chaps who come home recently from wars such as the Falklands and the Gulf in cardboard boxes, sleeping in our towns and cities this very night. And we should first of all be looking after them. So in very simple terms, I would say no, not every Gurkha does have a right to come here. If that's the case, we're going to have to stop recruiting Gurkhas in any case, because the whole point about having people who you pay as outsiders to be in your armed forces is it's a cheaper way of doing it. And if in the end we're going to have to further overcrowd our country with all their relatives, then it's not going to be a good it's not going to be a good thing. It's no longer cost effective. I would say in the end that's up to the British people. I'd suggest, and as a party it can be a very safe, fair swap, if we said to people, how about this? If we want 100,000 Gurkhas and their families to come to this country, then we're going to have to get rid of at least 100,000 of the unassimilable, disloyal elements of the Muslim population to make space for them. That would be a very good swap indeed, and if that's what the British people wanted, then that is something I, for one, would be prepared to bend our rules on, because I think that would be in the interests of this country, and it would give something to the Gurkhas, who undoubtedly do deserve a damn sight more than they're getting from this rotten, lousy government.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. All right.
The Times newspaper today sums this situation up quite succinctly. It says that at least 4,000 foreign criminals convicted every year of offences such as theft, burglary, benefit fraud and drug dealing are allowed to remain in the UK after they are released from jail. It then says Gurkha veterans are not allowed to settle in the UK. And yesterday it emerged that the British government had paid £600,000 in legal fees on behalf of 3 associates of bin Laden, who have been fighting US attempts to extradite them for 10 years, and we keep them here. So, I mean, if you're looking for justice, you've got to say the Gurkhas ought to be allowed to stay in this country. I think there's something else that ought perhaps to be considered as well. One, saying that, yes, certainly, I think they're a valuable asset to any country who is privileged enough to have them living here. But we should perhaps pay extra pension to the Gurkhas who've risked their lives, who fought in very dangerous situations, who've got medals for bravery, because they are superb people. But also, remember, their own country needs these superb people. It needs their talents. So why shouldn't we consider paying for training for these very gifted people and establishing training colleges for medicine, for law, for education, whatever is needed in their own country? If that's not possible, pay for scholarships for them to study elsewhere. Remember, they are the cream of the cream of the crop. And so if we could help them and the society they come from, after all, we are nationalists, then I think we could do that, and we could do it very efficiently and solve the problem with fairness to everybody.
Very good.
Well, I've mixed feelings on this, because certainly considering some of the terrible sort of people who come over here, I think the latest batch trying to think about joining the EU is Albania, which is a den of iniquity and corruption. And the Bulgarians, these sort of people, Romanians, they just don't seem to live by our standards somehow. And I think the Gurkhas are head and shoulders above these sort of people any day. Having said that, I'm rather curious as to why they want to live here. They were born in Nepal, they were raised in Nepal, educated in Nepal, and recruited, no doubt, in Nepal. There they fight for the British Army, or work for the British Army. At the end of it, they all want to come and live here. It just doesn't make sense. And I take issue with Joanna Lumley here, because she is not on the dole. She's not unemployed. She isn't on a council housing list. Joanna Lumley, I should imagine, I'm quite safe in saying this, is probably a multi-millionaire. As I do remember, several years ago, as Docklands was going to be improved, Joanna Lumley was with a consortium of friends, and they were buying up chunks of land in London Docklands, which have now been developed because she saw it as a way of making money. She must be a multi-millionaire now. She's not on a housing list, and if 100,000 Gurkhas come to live here, it means that 100,000 other people have got to go further down the housing list waiting for a house. And bearing in mind that we have to build one new house every 6 minutes to house the asylum seekers and the immigrants coming to live here, let alone our own people. So I say to you, do the Gurkhas have to really come here? What's wrong with their own country? And why should people like Joanna Lumley feel it's under an obligation because she's very wealthy? Why doesn't she pay out of her own money to house the Gurkhas?
I've got a bit of history with this question. Last year I had a call from the Alan Titchmarsh show, and within 24 hours I found myself doing live television answering this very same question about the Gurkhas. Now, there's a certain amount of media disinformation going on here. Originally it was a few old boys that Joanna Lumley was campaigning for who fought in the Second World War, and they were being thrown out, which was wrong. The Alan Titchmarsh show thought that I would say, yep, they've got to go. I didn't. I said, look, they've fought in the country, they've been loyal, they've been brave, cut them some slack. And I was applauded. And I said something else, and I was also applauded for that as well. This is a different matter, and this question highlights the way the British Army is opening itself up to become a mercenary army with so many foreign people serving in it, which is a bad idea, right? A bad idea. Now, where in the Gurkhas' contracts, all of those Gurkhas, does it say that you have a right to live in this country after your service? So they know what they're signing up for. It's another case, and I respect the Gurkhas a great deal, it's another case of ethnophilia. That's what we're dealing with here, and trying to instill guilt on us, and you know the ticket. And yes, within reason, some of them can stay, but 100,000 people, for heaven's sake, it's not on, is it? Not on.
No. All right, thank you. Right, here's a very short question from